All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Listening Session and Workshop on ARP Challenges and Opportunities. We're excited to have you all join us for this session today during the ACF Indigenous Programs Conference. Before we begin, we'll be sharing some instructions on how you can interact during this session. I am Vicki Pretlow. I'm your room monitor for this workshop, and I'm going to share a few little housekeeping items for you. So the first one, if you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and submit them in the chat box. I'm going to monitor that and record the questions for the end of our session. That'll be our listening session and Q&A portion. If you have questions during the Q&A session, please raise your Zoom hand, which is located at the bottom of your screen, or submit your questions again in the chat box, and we will try to get to as many as we can. Please note that I am going to provide the survey link for this workshop in the chat box. If you will give me just one moment to do that. We would really appreciate capturing your feedback and thoughts on this session, which you can do by taking the survey after the workshop is over. And once we get to the end, I'll actually put the link in again, so you'll have ready access to it again. And then finally, as a quick reminder, all workshop sessions are being recorded for on-demand viewing via the 2022 ACF IPC website until April 25th, 2022. Please visit the live agenda page if you would like to view these recordings after the conference. So let me get that link in the chat for everybody. There's that survey link. Okay, and with that, we'll jump right into today's presentation. So today you'll be hearing from 4 of us with the liheap program, and that includes Mr. Akam Rahman, who's the Operations Branch Chief in the Division of Energy Assistance in the Office of Community Services, Ms. Kate Thomas, who's an Energy Assistance Program Specialist in the Division of Energy Assistance, Mr. John Thompson, an Auditor in the Division of Energy Assistance, and yours truly, Vicki Pretlow, also an Energy Assistance Program Specialist in the Division of Energy Assistance. That's a lot of words. Our focus today will be to provide some updates from the Federal LIHEAP Office. We're going to share some information on the American Rescue Plan Act, some methods for conducting effective targeted outreach campaigns, and exploring potential partnerships with other tribal and state programs. And we also want a chance to hear from you. That's really what we're interested in doing. So toward the end, we'll open the floor for remarks and questions. And with that, I will hand it over to Akam Rahman to get us started.
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. It is always nice to be with a tribal conference. LIHEAP has been part of the ANA Indigenous Programs Conference for the last few years. I wish this was an in-person meeting, because in in-person meetings, as you probably know, that we always love to chat with you in person. We learn from you, and I really value the knowledge base that our tribal grant recipients bring to the table, because without that perspective, it is extremely difficult for us to manage the grant and as well as administer the program, which is LIHEAP, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. As many of you know, the purpose of LIHEAP is to provide home energy assistance to households who are in need. Simply what it means that our grant recipients must provide benefit in a way so that it can reduce the energy burden of the tribal households who pay an enormous amount of their income towards home energy cost. What that simply means is that we need to look at so many different factors when we design our benefit matrix for liheap. Income is just one. So I'm going to talk about some of these other aspects of liheap in a second. As Vicky mentioned, that the purpose of today's session is to hear from you. We would like to make this some sort of a transformational conversation. What I mean by that is that we want to hear from you, and we wanted to use the knowledge that we are going to gain today to not just to inform us, but also to redesign or design our technical assistance process for our tribal grant recipients. We wanted to know from you today, what are the opportunities and what are the challenges in, in implementing liheap, and specifically implementing the ARP, the American Rescue Plan Act funding, which Congress authorized last year, about $4.5 billion, which increased the program's allocation to the highest level ever. So it does pose a lot of opportunities for us to provide more funding in benefits, but also it can bring a lot of challenges. So we would like to hear from you about those challenges. Next slide, please. You all know that the purpose of liheap is to provide home energy assistance. In my mind and many of our mind, it's a single purpose program. That means the program is authorized to reduce home energy burden. But home energy burden has many contexts. Home energy also has many contexts. For example, during a natural disaster, our households, tribal households especially, will pose different kinds of needs. They may need to be relocated to a safer location. During flooding, they might have no electricity to their home. During a winter storm, they may be in a situation when they have limited or no heat. And same thing goes true during warmer months, when a heat wave could go through a tribal reservation and make it really unbearable for our tribal households to live in their home without cooling assistance. And then on the top of that, we have to think about the income situation. Are we able to help our households, not just with a larger benefit, but also are we able to move them along some sort of a scale where from at risk, if you can see it visually, from an at-risk situation when they're not able to meet their home energy needs to a situation when they can predict their home energy needs, and therefore they have, with support, they have money available simply to meet their other needs. All I am trying to say here is that the needs are multidimensional, especially during this pandemic. We are noticing that energy prices are going up. In tribal areas, we know that a significant number of our households, they heat their home with propane and oil, wood, and so many other types of deliverable fuel, and those prices are going up. We know that food prices have gone up. We know that housing prices have gone up. So when we help our customers, we should look into all these various aspects of their home and their needs in the context of how we can provide more benefit, how we can coordinate benefits with other programs, such as the emergency rental assistance program that many of you operate at the tribal level, and also some other programs such as CSBG, and programs available through a local community action agencies. We would definitely encourage you to braid resources. You're going to hear a little bit more about that in a minute. Without any further delay, I would like to hand it over to Vicky to talk a little bit more about ARP. Vicky?
All right, thank you, Akam. So we wanted to provide just a few updates from our office today. In response to the pandemic and the rising need for energy assistance, there have been three recent supplemental funding releases that I'm going to just kind of mention and focus on for a little bit. The first was the CARES Act funds. Now, those funds were released in on May 8th, 2020. And tribal liheap programs received a combined total of $10,225,487. Now, the obligation period for those funds has expired. It actually expired on September the 30th, 2021, but we wanted to just mention it because that was one of the funding buckets that was made available in response to the pandemic. The next one was the American Rescue Plan Act funding. Those funds were released on May the 4th, 2021. Tribal liheap programs received a combined total of $48,295,516. The obligation period for those funds is going to expire on September 30th, 2022. And John is actually going to provide some additional information on that funding specifically. And also there was the IIJA funding, otherwise known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Those funds were released on January 25th, 2022. So those are the most recent. Tribes received a combined total of $1,132,653. The obligation period for these funds will expire on September 30th, 2022 as well. However, there will be some additional funding provided under that act. It's going to be over the course of 5 years. And so I'd like to just circle back really quickly on the ARP funds. One of our main goals is to do whatever it takes and work with you however we can to ensure that all of the ARP funds are obligated according to your own definition of obligation by September 30th, 2022, since that's the deadline for obligation, and spent according to your own time frame. If you don't obligate those funds by the deadline, again, September 30, 2022, those funds will have to come back to the federal government, which is not something that we would like to see happen because we understand that across the whole country, the needs are very high in terms of energy. You know, the needs for energy are very high. And so that's another reason why we'd like to have an active conversation with you today to learn about opportunities that might be available to you and any challenges that you might be facing in using those LIHEAP ARP funds. We're happy to provide technical assistance, and just to kind of wet your whistle a little bit, some of the things that you're able to do, you can change your LIHEAP benefits and, you know, make those higher. You can pay past due bills, which may not be something that you're currently doing. You can maximize your existing benefits, increase crisis assistance, and you can do all of this without our office's prior approval or permission. I just wanted to point that out as well. And then lastly, I'll just mention, Akam touched on this, but the ERA, and that is the Emergency Rental Assistance. So the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 provided really historic resources to help states and localities and tribal programs protect families from the impact of rising energy costs and prevent winter utility shutoffs. These resources included $21 billion in emergency rental assistance and nearly $10 billion in homeowner assistance fund, or the HAF. And that's in addition to annual LIHEAP appropriations. These funds are available to help states, territories, tribes, and communities to provide home energy assistance to households in the winter, and then in moving forward as well. So because the ERA funds have that energy assistance component, we are strongly encouraging coordinating those funds to provide a maximum benefit for eligible applicants. And we've provided several training opportunities for grant recipients during what we were calling office hour sessions. We had some webinars as well, but more details on the concept of maximizing those funds and benefits to eligible applicants is available on our website. So you can reach out to your assigned liaison, and the list of those contacts is on our website as well. Or you can visit our website to check out those resources that are available to you. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to John. Oh, before I do, I would also like to mention the LIHWAP, the Low Income Home Water Assistance Program. I believe LIHWAP held a session yesterday, and so I'm sure if you were able to participate in that, you got a lot of details on that program. That's another program made available through the Division of Energy Assistance, Office of Community Services, whereby you're able to help your community members with some of their water bills and some of the other difficulties with household water. So I just wanted to mention that since we had that displayed on the slide as well. I'll go ahead and hand it over to John, who's going to provide some additional details on the American Rescue Plan Act funding.
Okay, I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Okay, I really apologize, everyone. If my picture's coming a little distorted, my computer completely went haywire, so I'm calling in through my phone right now. So a good amen for technology. So we're able to keep this ship rolling. As Vicky said, I'm going to speak about some of the numbers for LIHEAP in the past few years in regards to the our annual allocations and the supplemental funding. And as you know, 2020 is when everything kind of hit the fan, so to speak. And COVID came, and we had to adjust rapidly, not only here at the federal government, but all of our partners as well. And so to echo what Akam said earlier, we appreciate all of the work that you all are doing at your tribes to make sure that LIHEAP is being distributed in the best way possible. So if that said, in 2020, we had an allocation there. You can see a LIHEAP allocation of 3.73 million. And each of your tribes, based on our allocation, the percentages in our allocation, we're able to distribute that accordingly to each tribe. Now, what I want to focus on here in 2020 was you see the 0.9 there. That stands for 900 million that went towards the CARES Act, Coronavirus CARES Act. And we worked with all of our tribes and partners, states as well, and territories to make sure those funds were completely obligated by the end of last fiscal year, FY21. And even at the same time in FY, as you were obligating those funds, making sure those were off obligated, you were receiving funds for the ARP funds, the American Rescue Plan funds. And as you see there, our agency distributed $4.5 billion. And that was in the same way distributed based on percentages to states, territories, and tribes. And so right now, that is the focus right now. If we can, even though it's the largest sum of money, the plans are still the same. Us working with each other last year to see how we could find innovative ways to use or obligate the Corona CARES Act funds. It's the same with the ARP funds this year, because those funds expire, or the obligation period expires this year at 9/30/22, and they cannot be carried over. So, and as mentioned earlier, we do not want those funds back. So those funds belong out in the field, so we can do whatever is possible to get those supplemental funds out to all of our, to those who desperately need those funds. That would be great. And for this year, 2022, we released $100 million of the infrastructure funds. And those follow the same rules as your regular LIHEAP funds. And what I mean by that is 90% needs to be obligated in the first year. You can carry over up to 10% into the next year into FY23. And those funds are used for the same programs or components you would for your regular LIHEAP program. That could be crisis and cooling, heating, assurance 16 if you're running those, if you're doing that component of LIHEAP, administration, and as well as weatherization. So I just wanted to make a note of that. And as you see, we have a consistent LIHEAP allocation every year. This year in FY22 it was 3.7 billion, and that's separate from your from all the other funding that's there mentioned. I do want to make a note about the reporting practices of this. For each supplemental funds that you receive, they require a separate filing of the SF 425 report. The SF 425 was previously done or submitted in OLDC, but now that is transitioned over to PSC or to PMS. So it's very important that you don't miss out on the appropriate reporting for each funding stream that you receive, or else that would be looked at as a violation or constitute as an issue. So we want to make sure that we have that aspect covered as well. As I mentioned, for the American Rescue Plan Act, $4.5 billion were distributed, and that went out to all states and territories and tribes. And the obligation period does end this year for 2022. But I do want to make mention about the expenditure period. And the expenditure period will, I want to clarify this because for the expenditure period, there's been a lot of questions about that as to when that necessarily ends, and within for drawdown, because a lot of times you will obligate your funds and they haven't necessarily been expended yet. So your expenditures is when you actually liquidate the funds or your invoices come in, when you're paying the bills and the money is actually, you're drawing down the funds and it's leaving your PMS account and you're paying that. Typically that would last 90 days afterwards, after the obligation period, but we have recently released an IM providing more clarification on your expenditure period. And pretty much to sum that up, your expenditures, you want to follow your own tribal rules, what it says, what constitutes an expenditure. So I'll give you a quick example. So if you're running a federal program, in this case, LIHEAP, and your tribal rules say, for all federal grants that we are running, we have an expenditure period of 1 year with the federal grant that we're using. Then that is the rules you have to follow, because that goes with your the expenditure period or the policies and procedures of your tribe. That's just a quick example, but it's very important that, since LIHEAP is a block grant, it does adopt the rules and policy procedures of the agency that is running the program. So I just want to make a quick mention of that. And as program flexibility is available, we're going to go a little more into that later as well in this presentation, but in order to use these funds, it's important that sometimes we get a lot of questions about what are creative ways we can use these funds or expend them. And these particular Dear Colleague letters released last year, as you can see right there, Dear Colleague Letter 9 and 3 talks about flexibilities for the LIHEAP program of how you can use funds and implement them within the supplemental funds that you've received. So in this case, we're talking about the American Rescue Plan Act. So these are creative ways you can do that, as well as the IM1 release in fiscal year 21, which talks about how you can release, implement LIHEAP within a heat stress situation. So I just wanted to point those out. Those are definitely great resources that you may want to use to give you ideas how to use LIHEAP funds in conjunction with the supplemental funds that you've received. Now I'll pass it on to Kate.
All right, thanks, John. And those are great visuals. Thanks for that information. Now we're going to talk a little bit about outreach and coordination and how that has a big role in being able to timely obligate and expend your funds that we're stressing here so much today. So what is outreach? It sounds pretty straightforward, and really it is. It's simply the process of making information about LIHEAP available to everyone, but especially those who are the most vulnerable or in most need of receiving benefits from the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. And as you all know, as LIHEAP grantees, there are 16 assurances that all grantees agree to by applying for and accepting the LIHEAP grant. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is assurance number 3. It states that LIHEAP grantees will conduct targeted outreach. And targeted outreach means not only conducting outreach to the general public, but specifically trying to reach the elderly, that's those who are 60 years or older, the disabled, and households with high energy bills or energy burdens. And in addition, the vulnerable category includes households with children 5 years old and younger. So one thing to keep in mind when thinking about your outreach strategies is that tribes may decide whether outreach activities are part of your administrative cost or your program cost. And that's based on your own definitions of what administrative activities are. So you want to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Now, Assurance 1, another assurance I'm talking about now, Assurance 1 of the LIHEAP statute says that grantees will use LIHEAP funds to conduct outreach activities and provide assistance to low-income households in meeting their home energy costs, particularly those with the lowest incomes that pay a high proportion of household income for home energy. So just wanted to point out that there's another assurance that talks about outreach, and that is a big requirement. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide, highlighting, again, another responsibility for outreach and coordination. Tribes conduct outreach activities through their own offices, but you're encouraged to work with administrators of other similar programs. And in fact, Assurance 4 talks about that coordination here and coordinating with the Community Services Block Grant, the Social Security Administration, the Weatherization Assistance Program, and things of that nature. Now, if you'll go on to the next slide, talk about some examples of coordination used by tribes. Meetings between administrators of various tribal programs, so within your own tribe, to discuss things that are of mutual concern. So maybe just working with another tribal program that serves similar households or provides similar services. Also, referrals of clients to and from other programs. They could be tribal programs or state programs, or your state offices at the local level might be called DSS offices or DHS offices, or they're called various things throughout the country. But working with those to provide referrals back and forth is often a good example of coordination. And then combined outreach efforts, joint intake procedures when you can manage that. That's wraparound services, and then sharing records when not prohibited by law. And so many of you know that we encourage state-tribe agreements, also interagency agreements, things like that that help you to share records with your partners. Now, Section 2603 of the LIHEAP statute defines highest home energy needs as the home energy requirements of a household determined by taking into account not only the energy burden of the household, but also the unique situation of a household that results from having, and here are the key words, vulnerable populations, including young children, individuals with disabilities, and frail older adults. So when you're conducting your outreach and coordination efforts, make sure that you're taking into consideration trying to reach those vulnerable populations in your outreach. Now, this slide and the next slide provide just some links and tools designed to help provide LIHEAP grant recipients with methods for conducting effective outreach and targeted outreach campaigns, and exploring your potential partnerships with other tribal or state programs. So we strongly encourage you to explore all the possible outreach activities and strategies to reach households in need of energy assistance. It's really imperative that the LIHEAP grant recipients enhance their outreach efforts and develop improved strategies to serve additional households with a focus on those who are most in need. It's a really important component of successfully reaching eligible households, especially in light of all the additional funding availability. So some ideas just mentioned in these guidance documents are to work with other tribal programs, state offices, food assistance or food distribution networks, medical clinics, utility vendors. Another avenue to pursue in your outreach efforts is to foster partnerships or just relationships with offices of aging, Medicare savings programs, TANF, temporary assistance to needy families, SNAP or food stamp programs, and the Social Security Administration offices at the state and local levels. And lastly, this list here of outreach trainings, this is just a whole list of trainings that our office has provided over the past several years to LIHEAP grant recipients that contain information about conducting or performing outreach. Some of the activities mentioned here talk about posting flyers, doing mass mailings to potential applicants, taking part in social media, developing your interagency agreements, collaborating with places of worship and schools or family resource centers. Some grantees have had luck providing paper applications at festivals or events. There's just a myriad of ways to try to reach more people, including those individuals and households who may not have known about the program or needed any support in the past. So we encourage you to take a look, explore these resources if you're looking for new or creative ways to reach people who need energy assistance. So, Vicki, now I think we're going to have the listening session portion. I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Kate, John, and Akam. We are now going to open the floor for questions. So please raise your Zoom hand or type your question in the chat box and we'll get to it. We do have one question from Nancy Carnley. She's in Alabama. I think she's with Mashash in Alabama. And so, Akam, would you like to respond to Nancy's question? The question is, what if other agencies refuse to partner with a tribe?
Hey, Vicky, before I respond, Nancy, do you want to unmute your line and speak a little bit about the experience you have had with the local agency?
There's two agencies in particular. The first one is a local food bank. The lady just point blank told me they would be over her dead body before we'd never get any food from the food bank. And then the second agency is the local aging community on action on agency for aging people. I'm not sure the exact name of it, but I asked them to partner with us, explain to them what we did. And they sent me the email back to me without ever being read. And the other day I met the lady in person, and she was telling people that nobody could go and apply for senior farmers vouchers unless it was through them. And I said, well, our people's been coming to the office for years and filling out the application online and getting them. And she looked at me and she said, why? I said, because y'all don't serve them. Y'all tell them they can't be Native American if they go through y'all. So they go through us and get what services we can help provide for them. But they refuse to serve us. They refuse to partner with us. They are just, and they tell people that they do serve, that they don't have to go through us, go through the state, that that they have more funds than that we do, and that we shouldn't be even receiving funds, is what our people's told us that they do serve.
Yeah,
and they don't have a Native American on either one of their boards.
Nancy, I'm really sorry to hear about your experience, because obviously that's not an ideal situation, because when we talk about braiding resources, we talk about outreach and partnership. We wanted to make sure that both native and non-native agents, they understand each other's need and partner with each other. I think what I'm going to say is that maybe we can work with you offline with the state of Alabama to actually identify who these organizations are and to what extent we can seek the state of Alabama's liheap offices, because we do have a very good working relationship with the liheap office in Alabama to see if those local agencies are partnering with the state agency, and which state agencies will be happy to facilitate a conversation with this, because obviously this is not an ideal situation and we would like to definitely assist you, and for that matter, any other tribes who could be in a similar situation. Vicky?
Okay, thank you, Akram. So it doesn't look like we have more comments in the chat box or questions in the chat box, but I know that there are a lot of burning questions that folks have, because the money for a while was pouring in. We were just sending money out left and right. And so I'm wondering if there is anybody brave enough to unmute themselves and talk to us about some challenges that they might be having getting those funds out. We really don't want to see any of those funds coming back, because we realize that the need is tremendous everywhere, really, not only in tribal communities. And so, we want those funds to go out. We want it to be obligated. We want them to serve the people that they were intended to serve. So please, someone come forward, be brave, and let us know what challenges you might be having with getting those funds out. We're happy to help with tips on changing your benefits matrix. We're happy to help with tips on, Kate has provided some really good ideas for outreach methods. So we're happy to do any of those things with you, or to talk about any of those things with you.
Good afternoon.
And Vicki, oh, great. Thank you. Go ahead. I was just going to ask one more question, but I'd love to hear from you rather.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosalind Begay. I am with the Navajo Nation, and we are the Navajo Nation. The tribal nation covers 3 states. It straddles 13 counties. Well, yesterday, President Jonathan Nez did say we are covering 4 states. I know Navajo Nation acquired land and called the state of Colorado. So we are located in the 4 corners of the United States. And our population has expanded to over 400,000. The Navajo Nation's Office of Vital Records are doing a lot of outreach beyond the Navajo Nation, enrolling members of the tribe. You have to have 1/4 blood quantum to be eligible for membership. And if you de-enroll from the Navajo Nation, if you want to re-enroll to the nation, you have to go through various governmental legislative bodies, and the full council has to accept you back into the nation. So it's a lengthy process. But I would like to talk about liheap. That Navajo Nation is a grantee, and the Navajo Division of Health, that's where that program is situated. It's administered by the Division of Social Services. And I work in the office of the executive director, and I am assigned to policy related matters and governmental affairs issues. So I will speak to the benefit matrix. So we all are enduring increased fuel costs. The Navajo Nation is a geographically rural, remote land base. We are very rich in our culture, our language, and our membership now, as I mentioned earlier. And the fuel costs are escalating. We have not seen these prices in a number of years. And the food costs, the cost of living is increasing. So we all are aware of that. So being in this present situation, so I just heard earlier that grantees have the flexibility to consider changing their benefit matrix. By when you say that, does that mean that by what percent can we increase the benefit matrix? Because we were contributing to President Nez's Navajo Nation president's presentation yesterday. I asked the liheap, the program manager for liheap, whether they have considered in changing the benefit matrix to consider these situations that I mentioned. And she, the manager said that I will have to seek advice from the funding agency. So now I was hoping that the manager would be on attending this session. I don't see her name listed, but I will convey the response for this question I have. And with regard to outreach, the Navajo Nation government is still restricted from traveling. So we are not doing in-person direct service delivery, only in situations where it's absolutely necessary. So most of the communication is by telephone, Zoom, Skype, email, fax, drop-off boxes that are located at the entrances of the office. So we have some challenges with doing these outreach. However, we do have newspaper, we have other medium that we are utilizing. We have radio stations, we have newspaper, we can outreach with partners of sister agencies or sister programs, the departments within our division and other departments. We are doing that. We have, aside from liheap, this office also is administering LIWAP, and there are MOAs that have been entered into with utility providers. And so those are my two, well, my main question is the benefit matrix, whether the Navajo Nation would be able to increase the amount that it is currently providing and by what percent, or is there some guidance that the nation can look to? That was my question. Thank you.
Kate or Vicky, you do this on a day-to-day basis, right?
I think you're muted, Kate.
Sorry, happy to jump in there. Yes, you can definitely change your benefit matrix in the benefit area. So how much someone can receive. Say your maximum was $500 a few years ago for a heating benefit. You might consider the amount of funding you have and realize that you could actually provide a maximum of $1,000 to a household or $1,500 to a household based on your formula. Now, I do want to clarify that you cannot go as far as how much a household can earn or what their income is. You cannot go above 60% of the state median income or 150% of the federal poverty level, whichever is greater. So since Navajo covers 4 different states, you could actually have 4 different benefit matrices using the state median income in New Mexico, the state median income in Arizona. You know, they're going to be different income levels, and but you just can't, go beyond that threshold of 150 federal poverty level or 60% state median income. And then as far as what your benefit levels are, you can adjust those anytime throughout the year. You don't even need our permission to do that, or you can change it and just make the changes in the LIHEAP plan in a reasonable amount of time.
Okay, thank you, Kate. We don't have any other questions. We did have a statement from Michaelyn Alvarez. She's with the Confederated Tribes of Salish and Kootenai. And she is asking about tips on changing the benefit matrix. And so we've kind of touched on that a little bit. So hopefully you've gotten a response to that, Michaelyn. You're able to just take a look at it, and based on the extra supplemental funding that you've received, make a determination as to how much more you can provide in terms of a benefit to your eligible applicants. And then also, as Kate mentioned, if you are using one of the poverty guidelines that is lower, use the higher one. So if 60% state median income is higher than 150% federal poverty guideline amount, and you want to make more, and you're using the 150, bump it up and use the 60%. And that way more folks will be eligible, and you can get some more of those funds out of the door and help those households. So hopefully that is a little bit helpful. And since you and I work together directly, if you need any more tips, then you know how to get in touch with me, and we can talk a little bit more about it.
I would just also add to consider the supplemental benefits as well. If a house, say you have, so many X number of households received a benefit this year already, you might decide that looking at how much you have left, that you could provide a supplemental benefit to all of those households who previously received an award or a benefit this year, just an automatic payment to their utility account as an additional benefit. And a lot of places have seen the benefits of that. And it could be as little as $50 more to, $200-300 more per household. We do not have a limit on what your benefits can be or the supplemental benefits.
Thank you.
Vicky,
Yes.
if we have time, I just wanted to highlight one thing that Ms. Begay mentioned about the tribal population changes. It's an important point for us to clarify. One thing is, yes, in general, we are learning about tribal population increases. For fiscal year 2023 allocation, I believe we are going to use new census information, which is updated, which will be updated this year. So the tribal population numbers will be updated. But what I really wanted to say is that all the tribal allocations, the dollar amount, they come from each state's proportionate share. So the way the funding allocation works is that we look at the tribal population from census information, or we look at your tribe state agreement information. Whichever gives the greater allocation, we take that. So there is always an advantage in discussing your tribal population, your tribe state agreement updates with your state on a regular basis, because if you don't update your agreement, we'll be using the agreement we have in our office, with the agreement in place. And in some cases, both Kate and Vicky know this, that when we run the funding formula allocation each year, we often see that some of those agreements have been in place for many years, some cases 5-10 years. So that is always an advantage for you to go back to the state, also to your tribal administration, to understand and explain the impact of it. Because I would personally appeal to all of you that you look at it on a regular basis, because it does help your population. That's one thing. The other thing is, if you need our assistance in terms of facilitating this type of conversation, oftentimes they are not very easy to have with your liheap state office. We can definitely facilitate that. I know that Vicky and Kate and others have done that in the past. And also for Navajo Nation specifically, since you're going to be serving another state, population from another state, please look at your tribal agreements with the states if you have one. If not, then I would definitely encourage you to look into that option, because it might give you a much larger allocation amount compared to what we have now.
All right, thank you, Akam. And Kate put another good point in the chat box. Kate, if you want to just mention what you typed there.
Sure. I just was saying that another possible action to consider, if you have, if you're worried about how much money you have left from your ARP funds, your LIHEAP ARP funds, or your regular block grant funding, you could consider paying off a household's entire arrearage balance. You know, a lot of households aren't paying when they had a moratorium, and they racked up a huge bill. You know, we've seen $5,000 arrearages. So that is one thing to consider that we've seen a lot of grantees using their ARP funds for, is to pay off some of those arrearages of households. Just another option to consider. And I actually have to give Heather credit for that, Heather Jones here in the DEA, for reminding me of that.
Okay. All right, thank you, Kate. And I just wanted to highlight that I responded to you, Roz, and just posted a link there in the chat box, which is to our website. That is to the information memorandum that we released regarding the fiscal year 2022 mandatory amounts for the state median income. So you'll see that there. So I hope that has been helpful for you. We have another about 5 minutes, so we can take another question or hear from someone else about challenges. And then my colleague, Richard Lewis, put in the chat box, or successes. We don't have to only hear about challenges. You know, we want to hear if there is someone who has seen any notable successes with administering the supplemental funding, the ARP funds, the IIJA funds. You know, do you have any good testimonies? Have you heard from any of your households and how helpful your funding has been to them? We always love to hear stories about how the funding is being helpful to households, because, you know, at the federal level, we're a little bit removed from that, you know, and so anytime we get an opportunity to touch base with the programs that administer the funding, we always like to hear if there's some successes or families that have been touched by the funding. So we'd love to hear that too. Not only challenges, successes. Oh, okay, Nancy, several. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and unmute yourself. We'd love to hear one or two of those if you don't mind sharing.
Now, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. I forget on my computer, I had to do 2 unmutes.
Okay. Yeah. That second one will get you every time.
Yeah, it does. The first one was we used our money to buy emergency generators that were self-start for our elderly and our people that are disabled that were primarily having insulin, CPAPs, home dialysis and stuff like that. And families with children under the age of 5, we got emergency generators for them to use. And because we are in a tornado and hurricane alley, and we got 10, and there are 2 people that we have to hold them for because they live in such a high crime rate that if something happened, we'll take it to them. We've got a tribal person that owns a trailer. They'll take them to them and then they'll go pick them up and help them get them hooked up and everything like that. The second one was we had a little elderly lady who lives remotely by herself, no family, and her air conditioner and everything went out, and we purchased it, and the man put it in for her at no cost. Plus, he cut her grass for her that day. And then we had a lady whose son quit paying his light bill, and the bill was in her name, and she didn't have the funds to pay the light bill. So she brought him up here to get services, and we called him up, and we made him go through our budgeting class, and he has not been behind since then. And that's our 3 stories.
Those
Well,
are awesome.
excellent. Yeah, that is wonderful. It makes what you do, I know it makes you feel good and makes you know it's worthwhile. So that's great. We are actually going to end on a high note. Akam, if you want, I'm gonna go ahead and close this out, but if you want to say anything in the final minutes here, then I can go ahead and just wrap us up.
Nothing, Vicki, specifically. Just wanted to thank everyone and just wanted to assure everyone that our office is available for one-on-one and group technical assistance on any matter related to LIHEAP program administration. It's a block grant, so for the most part, you as a grantee have the authority to make these programmatic changes, policy changes. We also appreciate you touching base with our program specialist on a regular basis. I know you do that, but please know that you have our full support. We wanted to make sure that the entire LIHEAP allocation that you received last year and this year, they're obligated and spent according to your own rules, so that the intended purpose of LIHEAP is served for your tribal households. Thank you so much. Back to you, Vicki.
All right, thank you, Akam. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. It's 4:10 Eastern, right on the nose. Let's see, they had some items that they wanted me to share with you all as we wrap up. So they want you to continue to visit the 2022 ACF IPC website to explore the virtual exhibitor hall, to view the ACF grant recipient projects throughout the United States and Pacific Islands. You can find the link in the chat box once I get it there. You'll find it there. Also, they want you to visit the ACF resources page to access detailed information on the ACF program offices and partners. Lastly, let me just get that link there to the conference in there for you. And then I've also reposted this survey in the chat box as well. So if you wouldn't mind going on and clicking that survey link and taking that brief survey to let us know how we did and if we were helpful. And if you need anything else from us, we're happy to do it. You'll see that the contact information is on this last slide here, and these slides will also be available on the website for your convenience. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you everyone very much for your attendance and your listening and your participation. We thank you so much. And we're glad to have you all here, and we'll be talking to y'all soon. Thank you.